I actually don't believe that Dr. Price is a historical person. David LeBlanc, you doubt the historicity of Price? But of course he's historical. If not, then who are all those Bible geek listeners talking about? I swear the Price mythicists are getting out of hand, Jason Dressel. Fun fact, he's a composite character of persons both real and fictitious, John Stevens. David LeBlanc, I think he meant to say he'll be channeling the risen Price, Ben Holman. Ben Holman, you win. Best comment of the day by far, David LeBlanc. So no social distancing over there, Scott Higgins asks. Oh, we're kind of social distancing.
Yeah.
What, like 2.5 feet? No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure whatever you ask will be great, but please observe social distancing because I'm not ready to live in a world without the honorable geek in it. Carrie Polasic. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I have a question, but it has already been sent to his rain barrel, so hopefully in a few years he will have time to read it. Par Steinberg? Steinberg?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Can't pronounce the first name. It's got 2 dots over the A, so. Can you ask him what he thinks of Whitaker's hypothesis that Christianity kicked off in AD 70 as an unintended consequence of the Roman-Jewish War by Paul George?
Yeah, that's his the case he argues in a book. It's hard to say. That involves so many factors. I believe, what's his name? Benjamin W. Smith, I think, one of the great early mythicists. I believe he said that he thought that the crucifixion of Christ was really that of the Jewish people in the wake of the Roman tragedy. And others have said that too, and I've never quite found that convincing. It's certainly possible. Boy. So I don't think it's some sort of lunatic idea. And there are lunatic ideas out there about Jesus, it seems to me, by which I mean insupportable, totally speculative. You'd be surprised if you went to heaven and asked if it were true, and they said, oh yeah, it was. Oh, son of a gun. But that comes closest to the theory of our buddies Fahey and Valiant, that the Christ, really the Son of Man, was Titus, and that the prediction in the Olivet Discourse is correct, that within the present generation of Jesus' contemporaries, I mean, had there been any, right, if that time period, that they would see the destruction of the temple and the end in some sense. And you have the problem of saying, if the world was literally to end at that point, what's that passage doing in the book? Why didn't they just quietly drop it? Unless it was written, well, there are ways around that, like Timothy Kalane, a Catholic scholar in the 19th century, said that he thought that that whole part of chapter 13 of Mark was interpolated, that originally it was the leaflet that Christians in Jerusalem were circulating when they could see the jig was about up, and it was telling them to get, when you see the abomination of desolation, the ruination of the temple, get the heck out of there, flee to the mountains. And they did, according to what we're told, that they fled to Pella. And he said that sounds like, Eusebius tells us such an oracle was distributed. And Kalani said, I bet that's it, and that's where it was preserved. I mean, it's set up as a prophecy of Jesus, right? And so naturally somebody put it in a gospel. So you could say that there is a false prophecy in there because they just, without thinking about it, just preserved it by putting it in there. But without it, what the the question of the disciple, Jesus says, they're looking at the temple. They say, "Wow, look at these buildings. Nothing like this in Galilee." And he says, "Yeah, you think so? Take a look while you can, because it won't be long before this place is going to be razed to the ground." And, what? When is this going to be? And originally the answer was, "No one knows. Not me, not the angels, only God." And so maybe not the day or the hour, but that was it. It was simply about the destruction of the temple, and even Jesus didn't quite know, but it's going to be within this generation, if I can tell you that. And that's what Hal Lindsey used to say about the second coming with the Russian invasion of Israel. He said, "Well, it's got to be by the time the 70s are over." It's the same sort of a vague deadline. Now, you can explain it that way, and you can see Luke's tendency to try to evacuate the eschatology from the whole thing. But even he felt he couldn't cut that verse out, that this is all going to happen before this generation expires. But if Valiant and Fahey are right that it's a wink to the reader, and Apocalypse has always had winks to the readers, that it was trying to say, well, the Son of God was the son of the god Vespasian. It was Titus, and he did bring on the destruction of the temple within the time frame. And what did they think would happen afterward? Who knows? But if that's the case, you could say Christianity arose from that it took whether there was a Jesus or not. Jesus could have been a revolutionary leader, like Brandon said, but Christianity per se may have followed from it as a way of making virtue of necessity. So in that sense, I'd say, yeah, it's quite possible.
I grew up with the NIV saying money is the root of all kinds of evil. Now I wonder if that's an accurate translation or a conservative softening of Jesus' anti-capitalist stance. David Ellis Dickerson.
I think that is a correct translation, because I think it does imply it's the root of all manner of evils. And it's based on, or a parallel to, a cynic saying the love of money is the mother city of all evils. And that could be, that doesn't mean evil, it needn't mean there would be no evil if there weren't money, though I guess some anarchists and so on think that's true. But I don't think it's an unfair translation. I've heard that for many years, that the panta, or whatever it is, can mean all sorts of, all kinds of. I'm not sure how anybody would have thought that the love of money is the motivation for rape or child abuse or every lie someone tells to avoid embarrassment or something. So I don't know. I mean, he could be right, because we know there were certainly early Christians that had a communal lifestyle and renounced all possessions. Could be. But that's not Jesus, of course. That's from one of the pastoral epistles. And it's highly unlikely that whoever wrote those was anti-money. That's a kind of domesticated bourgeois Christianity. Pray for the emperor. Let's not hang our dirty linen out. We want to make a good impression. He talks about the family structure and so on. So I think it's more like the all sorts of evil.
Dr. Price, can we put together a university-level textbook of historicist/mythicist research material for students to delve into the source material and into scholarly interpretation of the source material? Christopher Lawson.
Well, I believe the book that John Loftus and I compiled, that is coming out, I guess, in a few months, from Hypatia Press, is pretty close to that. There are not historical source materials, because that'd be sort of impractical, because you're going to throw in the whole of Justin's dialogue with Trypho, which bears on it slightly. You're going to throw in 2 Peter, we weren't following cleverly devised myths and all that. or I suppose you could put in things like the various dying and rising gods reports. That wouldn't be a bad idea. Though some of that is available, but at least what this book, The Varieties of Jesus Mythicism, does is to corral just about every possible approach to mythicism, because there are many. And we have prominent advocates making the case that Jesus was an allegorical figure, that he, one thing or another, that he was creation based on Titus, that he was originally a sacred mushroom allegory like Soma was. I mean, that may sound absurd, but that's what the god Soma in Hinduism is. And it's not absurd to suggest there was a Jewish counterpart. And just all sorts of stuff, dying and rising gods. And so there's a lot of theories and interpretations and arguments. And in fact, in the introduction of the book, I say that mythicists like to say that historicists don't have a single theory. They have so many competing ideas of what the historical Jesus was, they kind of cancel each other out. Well, I hate to tell you, but it's the same with mythicism. There's no unanimity of thought on this, and you're going to have to pay your money and take your choice, or just remain an agnostic, but here's the options.
I think Christopher Lawson's also trying to suggest, because he knows the varieties of mythicism is what's coming, he says he would like to have a textbook that could even be maybe even offered to universities that has historicity and mythicism presented, and even challenging one another throughout the textbook, if you will, of like, here's the book on historicity, a huge, or a volume, a couple 2-volume type textbook that could be something for university students on really wrapping their heads around what historicity and what mythicism is suggesting over the historical Jesus or the non-historicity of Jesus, like a debate type book. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It would be interesting, but it's you'd really have to be careful to present the best arguments, the best case that can be made, and not throw any straw men in. And by that I mean some people make themselves into straw men by giving stupid arguments for things. So you'd have to have a bunch of excerpts from different books, like for instance from Bart Ehrman's book, Did Jesus Exist? And then some of Richard Carrier's replies to those specific arguments. I guess that could be done, though the problem I have is, just as no college will hire a mythicist because they think it's a fruitcake idea, I suspect there wouldn't be enough professors who would think it was worth dealing with in that depth. That's a shame, but I have a hunch the market wouldn't be viable for it. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done necessarily. I mean, I don't just publish books because I'm expecting to make $1 million off them. I know there's a very limited audience of interest. So that's not necessarily a bad idea.
Can we establish which Buddhist Christian scriptural parallels are actually pre-Christian? I have a couple of books on the subject which are interesting, but they don't provide adequate dating for the Buddhist scriptures.
There are a couple of them by J. Duncan M. Derritt, who he's written a bunch of things on Christianity and Buddhism. There are there's a book on the nativity narratives of both by a guy named Zacharias P. Thundy, Thundy, that deals with that. And these guys sift the evidence and have dating and all that. Plus there's I think there's at least 3 books that are compendia of writings on this subject by Michael Lockwood, spelled like it sounds. And one of them is called it's a play on the title The Unknown Christ of Hinduism by, oh boy, was it The Unknown Buddha? I'm not sure, but if you looked up his name on Amazon, there are a number of books, and he's alert to the dating questions and so forth. There are a bunch of older books still that argue for parallels and how one could have influenced the other, but I don't remember the names. These other books invariably mention them, though. Derrett was an amazing encyclopedia of a man. I mean, he really makes me look like a moron. He made me look, he's gone now, sadly. He wrote for the Journal of Higher Criticism, but he has a shelf of books. The guy knew everything about Hinduism, Buddhism, their religion, their legal systems, early Christianity, Old Testament stuff. He was amazing. I was privileged to correspond with him a good bit during his last years. I can't think of him without thinking what a tragedy his loss is.